All right, one more panel standing in the way of everyone in lunch, but pleased to welcome on stage Bryan Hansen from J&J, Max Gaitán with Icon, Beverly Hardy with Sanofi, and Jen Horonjeff with Savvy Cooperative. All right, there we go. All right, excited now to talk about what, of course, is really important, thinking through implementation and deployment strategies. I don't think we need to do too much more convincing to the folks in the room that there is tons of value in the right fit-for-purpose digital solutions for the right patient population, but still, there's a lot of considerations to take into account when it comes to figuring out the best implementation and deployment strategy that enables us to maximize adoption. So thrilled to welcome these panelists on stage with me, and I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourselves, maybe starting with Bryan.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, everyone. Bryan Hansen, Director of Innovative Health at J&J. By training, I have a PhD in neuroscience, a heavy emphasis on computer science, and have really been trying to merge those two things, smash them together for most of my career. What we're focusing on right now at J&J is, particularly in global development and within innovative health, is, how can we think about digital plus? So thinking about the introduction of digital technology into trials, but what else could we do when it comes to expanding trial access, patient engagement? How can we improve some of the operational efficiencies that we have within our clinical trials? How do we think about burden at sites? So it's really a full end-to-end process, the way that we're focusing on this and building on some of the work that you saw earlier from Bahadur and data science. We are really kind of driving this, ahead with a full integration in global development. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Really glad to be here. My name is Max Gaitán. I am an outcomes researcher at Icon. I work on data products for our outcome measures platform. And with that, I lead development of Atlas, which is a platform for evaluation and selection of digital health technologies. So thank you very much for having me, and glad to be on the panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bev Hardy. Thanks so much for having me. I lead Sanofi's new Digital Biomarker Innovation Lab. Sanofi's been doing work in digital biomarkers for quite some time, but there's a recognition that we really need to boost confidence, get people to adopt, get people to try, and de-risk and increase the probability of success of these digital biomarkers as we deploy them in trials. And so that's exactly what we do. We generate early data, firsthand experiences, and insights to that end. I don't have a trials background or a scientific background. My background's in software product management. So I know the digital, I know how to bring together cross-functional experts and collaboration, and that's what we've heard already a ton of today. So that's me and my role.
Thanks. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Horonjeff, founder, CEO of Savvy Cooperative. If you're not familiar with Savvy, what we do is patient insights all day, every day. And I care about this because I myself am a patient, grew up with chronic illness, had a brain tumor as an adult, so been living that patient life. But by way of professional background, I was a human factors engineer and a human-centered designer. My PhD is in environmental medicine. Don't let that scare you. I was studying what matters to patients and their health and health behaviors. So that's really where my expertise lies, is really trying to understand patient priorities. And that's what we do, helping our clients, like the sponsors that are here in this room today, to understand their patient population so they don't design in a vacuum and frankly build a bunch of crap the patients don't want or need and add undue burden to them. And we're here to help elevate what it is that they do want you to build. So excited to be here.
Thank you. So to kick things off, thinking about implementation. Of course, when we're implementing these solutions, it's paramount to be thinking about accessibility and usability. Otherwise, we won't see any compliance or adoption of these solutions. And specifically, when it comes to more elderly populations and those with lower socioeconomic status, some of these digital health solutions may not be so accessible. So I'm curious to hear, when you do go about building out your implementation strategies, how do you ensure that you're not only further broadening some of the healthcare disparities that we're seeing today? And maybe Bev, do you want to kick that off?
Sure. Well, there's really no substitute for patient voice. We shouldn't be trying to. We shouldn't be trying to shortcut. But I'll share something that we've been doing within Sanofi, which is really quite interesting, and I'm always surprised with the insights we get. We have been partnering with our employee resource groups, which many of your organizations probably have, organized pretty much by employees, self-organized, and they basically are created around various identities or topics of interest or shared passions. And these groups are highly, highly motivated to ensure that diverse representation is included as we think about our trial designs. They're also really excited to be involved in not only fostering culture and community from an HR perspective and engagement, but they're so excited to be able to actually contribute and ensure that diverse representation makes it into R&D and Sanofi strategic initiatives. So we have our Pride LGBTQ organization, for instance. We have, Asian Pacific Excellence. We have Parents of Sanofi. So Matteo, I think, was digging at Pharma for not taking the patient or the parent perspective in. Well, we can, because we have a working parents group who can provide input into some of those protocols. So that is not something we should ever replace the patient voice, but I like to be prepared before I take that valuable time, and we can learn a lot from people who are humans, and they can tell us about that experience.
Bryan?
Yeah, no, I just building on that, I don't think that there's any substitute for testing the technology in the patients that will be in the trial. So I think a lot of the value add that we can get is from, again, partnership, cross-pharma, cross-sponsor with other vendors and companies to start to understand the usability and the feasibility of implementing some of these technologies in patient populations. We hear a lot about wearable technology, particularly in Parkinson's disease or other movement disorders. But we're using wearable devices that have multiple straps that you have to kind of put on. Any opportunity that the patient has to take the device off is an opportunity that they're not going to put it back on. So really trying to understand that perspective from the patient is paramount, and it's critical, and it's something that we take into consideration in all of our studies.
I think from the evidence generation standpoint, I would say that building upon what's been done in the past is also paramount. And certainly publications are no substitute for directly hearing the patient's voice. But qualitative publications can be really important to evaluate early on in the process, such that when you go to actually pilot these solutions, we're actually building upon what's been reported to do well with patients, and also avoid pitfalls that have been published in the past. And I would say that beyond that, I think reporting is also critical industry-wide. It would be really a breath of fresh air, I think, to read a publication that described patients not only in the context of like age, sex, weight, but also in terms of their digital literacy, internet access.
Yes, I just want to add to that onto the tech enablement piece. I think is a big one. I think it's really important to survey your sites and your patients to understand what technology do they have access to. We can't just assume that everyone has a smartphone or a smartphone that's up to date enough to be able to handle whatever applications we might be deploying. We also can't assume that everyone has access to Wi-Fi or cell signal. Sometimes we might need to provide hotspots, or maybe provide, rather than an app, but a web link out to patients so they can access that application through maybe their local library if we're not able to provision them with a device. So I think it's really important to understand the patient population you're working with and what resources the sites that are supporting them have available as well.
Yeah, to speak to that sort of accessibility aspect, we do this kind of feedback all the time to get feedback on devices that are oftentimes going to be used in trials or like companion apps and things like this. And I feel like it's so easy just to go to think about age. That's where people are always like, oh, and like we use technology at Savvy, and people go, well, gosh, like how can you talk to older people? It's like, give them a break, folks. And so like we've had a 96-year-old use our technology with ease. And then we have like honestly. Sometimes it's some of our clients and they're like in their 30s, they're like, I can only use Teams. And that's like the only thing that they know how to function with.
Zoom, we can also use Zoom.
Yeah, it's just, some people can use Zoom, but like that's iffy. So I think that like being able to understand that there's a lot of variability there, and that's just humans, right? We have different preferences too. So taking that into account, not making assumptions that something couldn't happen, but to Bryan, your point, like we then need to do that specific work to make sure that this patient population, so again, my background is in human factors. I grew up with forms of arthritis, so I have arthritis in every joint in my body. So that was a lot of my early work, is working with people with arthritis and cerebral palsy and Parkinson's, so that they can understand, like, can we functionally even use these things? A lot of the time it comes down to things like font sizes and making sure that that can be used, screen readers. David's example earlier for the click about migraine, happy to say that those were Savvy patients that helped to give feedback on Click's migraine. I can't tell you if we picked out the green or not, but that was probably a designer choice. But patients being able to say, like, these are the challenges that I have. So going through the motions to actually get feedback at all those stages, and not just when something is deployed. Please do this earlier on. You're going to waste your money spend building something that functionally patients are then saying, I can't use this.
Yes, I love that. And yeah, just kind of further dialing into the whole usability piece. I'm curious how your teams go about doing usability work. Because, a lot of folks might do it on healthy volunteers with maybe employees at the company themselves. But frequently, when you actually deploy things into the real world with that specific patient population, you might see different results. So I'm curious how you've done usability studies within your organizations.
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, so a lot of the expense and the time and the effort for any one company to take this on becomes too daunting. So I think that the opportunity for us is really that pharma partnership, the consortia effort. We're a part of things like Radar, AD, Cumulus. We're supporters of everything ALS. We really think that there is an opportunity for folks in the room here today, vendors, and folks to come together along with patients to get those insights. So then we can present that back to clinical teams and to leadership with a very unified and strong proposal and business case for the use of this in patients. Not just the healthy controls, but also actually in the patients that we're going to be in that trial. So having a seat at that table to kind of co-design that protocol with other pharma partners is essential.
I'll talk about the testing aspect from like the patient lens where we sit, is being able to like have some visibility into the future. Please don't just do patient engagement as like, I talked to 10 patients one time and now I know that, because it needs to be an iterative process. This is actually what I love about working with technologists, is because they understand that need. Then they enter into the healthcare sphere and go like, wait a minute, like how do I actually get access to the end user, the patients? So the way that we typically work is building out more of like a programmatic model, working with that particular patient cohort. So like I already mentioned Click, this public work that we've done related to building out that, so that in this case with migraine patients, that over time, iteratively going back and testing with those patients. Other examples that I can share that are public, our work with AstraZeneca, now Evanova, related to remote patient monitoring and the digital devices that are used there. Those are starting at the Figma stage, so that you can understand before you go and develop that out of like, does this make sense? And you hear patients say, well, why are they asking me that? Why are they asking me about like different demographics? Okay, let's add an explanation in there. Now I need you to report on this. Wait, but how am I reporting on this? They're asking me about this part of my body, but I already answered this question. So you just watch them get so confused. So getting all of that out before you start programming that. Other fine folks we can call out, our friends at Takeda, who've been working with us to also then do this work even earlier, which is the goal, to be able to get feedback from patients about what is their existing experience like with certain types of either technologies or the ways that they're getting support, understand where they're entering the conversation before building something out that, again, maybe is not a high priority for them. You thought it was a priority sitting in your office and, spitballing some ideas, but really validating that concept with patients first before you go and build it.
I don't want to overly discount the value of getting healthy volunteers input from humans, right? Again, I like to be prepared. I like to know what to anticipate before I go in with an actual patient population. So we do almost what I'm starting to refer to internally as unusability testing. So if you do it with a group of healthy volunteers and they invariably give you feedback that this was terrible, right? Like, it's not going to work with anyone. So don't embarrass yourselves and take that first version to actual patients. But the other thing I wanted to share is we are looking, in addition to sort of the usability of the device, we are really trying to broaden and look at the whole experience. So we've been doing more sort of end-to-end protocol dry runs. We just started this where we'll take, the protocol, which is beautiful and perfect on paper, no flaws, but it's the happy path. It's not necessarily looking through the eyes of each of the stakeholders. So we actually recruited some volunteers to role play, and they basically took the protocol from beginning to end. And instead of saying, this is more than just UAT, this is more than, okay, mock investigator, use the platform, can you complete tasks? Patient, can you use the app, and can you complete, the assessments? But it's, okay, you playing the clinician, teach this person how to use the app. And then there's a caregiver at home who couldn't come to the appointment today. What are we going to prepare them with so that they can do it with their loved one at home? So really trying to take some of those unwritten parts of the protocol and the sort of what-if scenarios that people run into, and then we bake those into FAQs, we bake those into site training to, again, increase the probability of success for implementation.
And I love that. The other thing I'll add is that we see a lot of our sponsors then doing that, like now coming up with like these instructional videos and trying to understand when they come and they do the work with our patients of how do you want this information shared? Do you want instructions every time you log on to the app? And some people say yes, some people say no. How do you add that sort of, personalization for that so that people can feel comfortable using it?
Just to add there, I think, I bring the perspective of working with teams who are planning these kinds of evaluations. And it's really common to see that, the validity of the clinical data coming back from a DHT, a digital health technology, is considered as a success metric. But it's just as important to consider these types of usability studies in the success metrics before actually moving to deployment. So really capturing the holistic picture of, does this device work? It's not just about the clinical data. It's actually, were these usability studies considered as success metrics that we checked before moving forward?
Yes, and I think kind of the moral of the story is we just can't assume anything. In a past life, I worked at a company called AI Cure, and we built digital biomarkers using recordings of patients through interviews, and it was of vocal and video data of their face. And it was really important that we were also capturing that video data of the patient's face. And we did a bunch of usability testing internally. Our developers, our team, understood how to use the tech, but we were sitting a bit too close to it. Because when we went to Mount Sinai and did actual usability testing with patients with negative symptom schizophrenia, they would get questions and get prompted by the app to answer a question, and they would put it up to their ear and talk into the app, like one would assume. So we had to build in guidance into the app to say, please hold the phone away from your face, hold it up, walk into brighter lighting, based on how they were working with the solution. So really important, of course, to make sure that you do get that feedback. And that brings us back to, we don't have a ton of time, but kind of deployment, last mile. What are some lessons learned that you've seen that really enable you to maximize adoption and ensure that deployments are successful? And I would say really the biggest one that I've seen is just the importance of onboarding, back to the whole not assuming things. So many people told us, lots of clients, that patients with schizophrenia will not use an app and record their face and voice speaking into it, that they're just not going to use it. They're not going to be compliant. Meanwhile, we did really strong onboarding, making sure that those patients really understood the purpose of the data being collected and how they were contributing to scientific research, and we ended up getting incredible compliance. But curious to hear some other lessons learned from our panelists.
I'll share some, building off of that and sort of the training and the data aspect of it. Patients care about the quality of their data. we hear from patients that they may not sign up for a trial because they don't want to, make the data junky if they don't feel like they can follow that protocol. It's not that they don't want access. They're just like, oh, shoot, I can't do that, so I don't want to mess it up for everybody else. So don't underestimate that. I'll also share a story that I think I always love as an example of something that you did not think about, but maybe some of you think about on a regular basis. One woman I was talking to about being in a trial with a wearable, and she said that she ultimately couldn't use the wearable. We continue the conversation. Why is that? Because her cat chewed through the power cord. My cat does that all the time. No power cord is safe. It needs the special tethered sort of wire so that they can't chew through it. And so then that was done in usability, and therefore they were able to make a change. But that's something that's so important that you did not think about the end-to-end patient experience, and it's a simple fix, but if we don't understand that and onboard patients, then you're not gonna have it. And countless other examples like that. But I think as a patient, when we get tools and think about the pandemic when all of a sudden everything turned digital and we threw everything at patients and said good luck, and it doesn't integrate together, the systems are at odds with each other. If I need to wear your wearable, can I wear my wearable? Because I want to close my rings. And if you're telling me that for 2 weeks out of every month, I'm not allowed to use my wearable, that's going to mess me up and I don't want it. So all of this is really, really important when we think about the deployment.
And to that point too, patients want their data back, and I think that's something that a lot of folks are still working on, but how do we return meaningful data back to patients who are using these digital solutions?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to add to that, because it's so interesting, the current design that we have today in trials where we are expecting patients to drive to a site, leaving the comfort of the technology that they exist in this world today, Amazon, Netflix, everything is innovative, and then they come to the site and they basically lose 10 years in technology innovation, and then they're handed the paper and pencil assessment. So I think that that's just that is such an important piece to also recognize, is that the relationship between technology and patients is going to continue to be there, and that's the contract that they're essentially making, is that they want their data, they want to understand what's going on, and they want that insight.
I'm actually going to jump in on the paper and pencil comment. So, I'm a proponent of digital health technologies. I built Atlas, which is a platform for evaluating them. And speaking of paper and pencil, I think it's really critical to bring to allow the patient to see their voice coming through in a study. Just because we're slapping a sensor on their wrist doesn't mean that they shouldn't be, seen and heard in the study. Yes, it's critical to make wearable technologies, integrate into their lives and make it easy for them to be able to participate in the study and make that seamless. But also, not forgetting that these people, want to contribute to research and want to contribute to the greater good. And so allowing their voice to come through by integrating digital with, existing assessments like COAs and so on, to ensure that their voice is not, left behind.
Maybe just what I'll add is none of the things that we've talked about are necessarily deal breakers, right? These are things that by testing them early, you discover them. It gives you some of my favorite small tests that we do. There may be anomalies in the data. That's a fantastic dialogue opener with the vendors and the DHT companies you're working with to say, I wasn't expecting this. Can you help me better understand it? Our biostatisticians are there. They know how to account for these anomalies when they come in the real data. We know, okay, if someone's going to want to close all their rings, what can we adjust about the protocol so that we can still accommodate and still get some data, if not continuous data for 12 months? So these are all just early insights that then we build into and factor in, the realities of life, the realities of technology, and we can still use them, and we can give that confidence to our internal stakeholders to say, it's okay. There will be bumps. We will try to surface as many as we can and mitigate those risks.
Maybe I'll just layer one last story to talk about the anomalies, to tie it all back together of why it's so important to understand the patient priorities. There was a study now, maybe 7, 8, 10 years ago. It was in rheumatoid arthritis, and it had a wearable to track activity. And the hypothesis being that as symptoms and pain went down, activity would go up. And they saw this particular individual who was in the study, and sure enough, pain was going down, but so was their activity level. So they thought, gosh, are they not wearing it? So they call up this particular patient and say, what's going on? They said, I feel fantastic, but I am an author. And now that I finally feel well enough, I can sit and I can write. That was the outcome that was most important to them. So it just goes to show we can't only be reliant on these types of measurements to understand the full patient perspective.
I love that, and we are about at time, so I won't stop anyone from getting their food. We will break now, but really appreciate these fantastic panelists. Feel free to grab them during our lunch break. We have about an hour until the next set of sessions where we'll be focusing more all about the patients, how to better engage and empower patients within our clinical trials and clinical care. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Like it was
Fun.
hot up there. Yeah. I know. I could say.